What happens when entitlement and prejudice collide with silent power at 35,000 feet? In the hushed, exclusive world of first class, a woman's luxury trip turns into a public spectacle of scorn, all because of the color of her skin. She's mocked, belittled, and targeted by a fellow passenger who believes she doesn't belong. But the aggressor, so confident in her own superiority, is about to learn a life-altering lesson. The woman she's harassing isn't just another passenger. She's the one who signs the checks, the one who owns the plane, the one who can make a world of trouble with a single phone call. Stay tuned for a story of shocking audacity and the epic hard karma that followed. The Aura Airlines first-class lounge at JFK Terminal 4 was an oasis of curated calm. Soft jazz piano notes trickled from invisible speakers, mingling with the subtle scent of white tea and bergamot. Here, the chaos of a New York airport was a distant, vulgar rumor. Passengers spoke in hushed tones, their movements unhurried, their clothing whispering of wealth rather than shouting it. Dr. Imani Carter sat in a plush armchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ballet of ground crews and aircraft on the tarmac. She was dressed in a simple yet elegant navy blue jumpsuit, the fabric draping perfectly over her athletic frame. A pair of understated diamond studs were her only jewelry. On the table beside her lay a leather-bound journal and a copy of The Foundations of Quantum Computing. She wasn't reading it. She was simply enjoying a moment of stillness before her flight to London. This trip was a blend of business and pleasure, a final review of Aura's Heathrow operations followed by a week of unwinding in the English countryside. The calm was gently disturbed by the arrival of a couple. The woman, whose voice was several decibels too loud for the serene space, was a cascade of brand names. A Bottega Veneta handbag was slung over an arm adorned with a clanking gold Cartier bracelet. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a rigid helmet, and her face was a mask of expensive, tight-skinned surprise. Her husband, a graying man in a slightly too tight polo shirt, trailed in her wake like a weary dinghy towed by a gaudy yacht. "Gregory, for heaven's sake, do try to keep up," the woman announced to the lounge at large. "You'd think you'd never seen a private lounge before." She scanned the room, her eyes cataloging the other passengers, assessing their worthiness. Her gaze swept past a hedge fund manager typing furiously on his laptop, lingered on a famous actress trying to be inconspicuous behind oversized sunglasses, and then landed with a noticeable snag on Imani. Imani felt the woman's eyes on her. It was a familiar sensation, a look that was part curiosity, part appraisal, and part dismissal. Imani met the stare for a brief second, offering a polite, neutral nod before turning her attention back to the window. The woman, who Imani would soon learn was named Caroline Beaumont, was not to be ignored. She guided her husband, Gregory, to a pair of seats directly across from Imani. "Can you believe it?" Caroline stage-fused in a whisper that carried across the Italian marble floor. "They just let anyone in here now. Credit card points, I suppose. It completely dilutes the experience." Gregory mumbled something incoherent, his eyes fixed on the complimentary selection of aged cheeses. Imani sipped her sparkling water. She had designed this lounge herself, alongside a team from the Rockwell Group. Every fabric, every piece of art, every item on the menu had been personally approved by her. The goal was tranquility, exclusivity, and impeccable service. The irony that she was now being perceived as an interloper in her own creation was not lost on her. She chose, for now, to ignore it. People like Caroline Beaumont were an unfortunate but predictable variable in the equation of public life. The boarding call for Aura Flight 100 to London Heathrow was announced. Imani closed her journal, gathered her things, and walked towards the gate with the same unhurried grace she did everything. The Beaumonts, of course, pushed to the front of the first-class line, eager to be the first to board. On board, the cabin was a study in sophisticated luxury. Each of the 12 first-class sanctuaries was a self-contained suite with a lie-flat bed, a personal minibar, and a 24-inch screen. Imani's seat was 2A, a window seat on the port side. As she settled in, arranging her journal and noise-canceling headphones, She heard that grating voice again. "Oh, look, Gregory. She's in here with us," Caroline said, her voice dripping with faux surprise. The Beaumonts had been assigned seats 2D and 2G, directly across the aisle. "Now, Caroline, please," Gregory murmured, his face flushing with a hint of embarrassment as he saw other passengers glancing over. Caroline ignored him. She looked directly at Imani and gave a tight, condescending smile. "It must be so exciting for you," she said, her tone as patronizing as a pat on the head. "Did you save up for a very long time for this?" Imani looked up from her seat, her expression unreadable. She held Caroline's gaze. "It's a comfortable way to travel," she replied, her voice even and calm. The simplicity and confidence of the answer seemed to momentarily fluster Caroline, who had clearly expected either intimidated silence or a defensive retort. But she recovered quickly. "Well, I'm sure it is," she sniffed, turning to stow her oversized handbag in the overhead compartment with a dramatic huff. "Just try not to be too overwhelmed by it all. The cutlery is on the left." A young flight attendant named Chloe, bright-eyed and professional, approached Imani. "Dr. Carter," she said with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome aboard. May I get you a pre-departure glass of champagne? We have the 2008 Dom Perignon you requested." Imani smiled back. "Chloe, it's good to see you. And yes, that would be lovely. Thank you." Across the aisle, Caroline's head whipped around. Her eyes narrowed. The flight attendant knew this woman's name. Not just knew it, but addressed her with a title, Doctor, and she had requested a specific vintage of champagne. Caroline's perfectly constructed reality, where she was the queen of this cabin and Imani was a charity case, was beginning to crack. But instead of reconsidering her prejudice, she doubled down. This woman was clearly a charlatan, an imposter who had somehow duped the staff. The fight, in Caroline's mind, had only just begun. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, the cabin settled into a comfortable rhythm. Chloe moved through the aisle with practiced efficiency, her service seamless and discreet. When she presented Imani with a flute of pale gold champagne, she did so with a small, respectful bow. "Your favorite, Dr. Carter. We also have the updated menu for your review, though Chef Antoine has already prepared the sea bass with saffron risotto as you prefer." "Thank you, Chloe. You and your team are, as always, exceptional," Imani said, her appreciation genuine. She knew the work that went into creating this level of personalized service. She had written the protocols for it. Across the aisle, Caroline watched this exchange with a look of curdled fury. She flagged down Chloe with an impatient snap of her fingers, a gesture more suited to hailing a taxi than addressing a premium cabin crew member. "Excuse me," Caroline began, her voice sharp. "My husband and I would also like some of that champagne." "Of course, Mrs. Beaumont," Chloe replied politely, unfazed. "I was just about to come to you." "And another thing," Caroline continued, leaning into the aisle and lowering her voice to a conspiratorial yet carrying whisper. "I don't mean to make trouble, but I am just a bit concerned about some of the other passengers." She flicked her eyes pointedly towards Imani. Chloe's professional smile remained, but a flicker of apprehension appeared in her eyes. "All of our first-class passengers are confirmed and ticketed, madam. I assure you everything is in order." "Is it?" Caroline challenged. "It just seems odd, her being so familiar with you, knowing your name, getting special meals. Some of us," she added, gesturing between herself and Gregory, "are paying full fare, a very full fare. We expect a certain caliber of fellow passenger. We don't want our experience diminished by people who've won a radio contest or something." The insult was so transparent, so steeped in venomous classism and racism, that Chloe was momentarily stunned into silence. She looked from Caroline's smug, expectant face to Imani, who was now looking directly at them, her champagne flute held perfectly still in her hand. The calm facade was still there, but her eyes held a new intensity, a focused stillness that was far more intimidating than any angry outburst. "Ma'am," Chloe said, her voice now firm, Dr. Carter is one of our most valued passengers. I can assure you she belongs here." "Oh, Dr. Carter," Caroline mocked, making air quotes with her fingers. "What is she a doctor of? Weaveology? Please, I'm not a fool." Gregory, who had been trying to shrink into his seat, finally spoke up. "Caroline, that's enough. You're making a scene." "I am ensuring the quality of our purchase, Gregory," she hissed back. "This is a 5-figure experience. I will not have it cheapened." Imani placed her flute on the small table beside her with a soft, deliberate click. She unbuckled her seatbelt and rose to her feet. She was taller than Caroline, and her presence seemed to fill the space. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Mrs. Beaumont," Imani said, her voice low and dangerously calm. "I have done nothing to you. I have not spoken to you, nor have I interfered with your flight in any way. Yet you seem to have developed an obsession with my presence on this plane. You have insulted me. You have questioned my right to be here, and you have harassed the cabin crew on my account. I am asking you once, and only once, to stop." The sheer authority in Imani's voice silenced the immediate vicinity. The businessman in 1A lowered his newspaper. The actress peered over her sunglasses. Caroline, however, was incapable of backing down. To her, this was a challenge to her social standing. Being confronted by the very person she had deemed inferior was an intolerable affront. "How dare you speak to me that way?" she squawked, her face turning a blotchy red. "You are the one who was out of line. I should have known. People like you are always looking for a handout and then get aggressive when you're called on it." She turned to Chloe, her voice rising in pitch. "I want her moved. Put her in the back of the plane where she belongs. I am a Diamond Medallion member with your partner Airline. I have status. What does she have?" Chloe looked panicked. This was escalating beyond her training. "Mrs. Beaumont, I cannot move another passenger. Please return to your seat. The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign." "I will not," Caroline shrieked. "Not until this stowaway is removed from my sight. I feel threatened." It was the word threatened that changed everything. It was a loaded, dangerous accusation, a final line crossed. Imani looked at Caroline, then at the distressed Chloe, and then at the anxious faces of the other passengers. Her patience had been a dam holding back a reservoir of power, and Caroline's bigotry had just dynamited it. She maintained her calm demeanor, but turned her full attention to Chloe. "Chloe," she said, her voice cutting through Caroline's tirade. "Please go to the flight deck." Chloe stared, confused. "Dr. Carter, go to the flight deck," Imani repeated with an air of absolute command. "Tell Captain Harrison that the owner is on board. Tell him we have a Code 3 passenger disturbance and I require his presence in the cabin immediately. Use those exact words." The cabin fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Even Caroline's mouth hung open, a half-formed insult dying on her lips. Chloe's eyes widened in dawning comprehension. She had always known Dr. Carter was a VIP, a friend of the airline perhaps, but the weight of the words, "the owner," landed with the force of a physical blow. Without another word, she nodded, turned on her heel, and walked swiftly towards the armored cockpit door. Gregory Beaumont looked as if he had just seen a ghost. He stared at Imani, then at his wife, his face a mask of pale horror. The expensive champagne in his stomach had turned to acid. Imani Carter remained standing, a pillar of quiet authority in the aisle of her own aircraft, waiting for her captain to arrive. The power dynamic in the first-class cabin had just shifted seismically, and the ground was about to open up beneath Caroline Beaumont's feet. The few moments between Chloe's departure and the captain's arrival felt like an eternity. The only sound was the hum of the Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engines spooling up for takeoff. No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes were on the two women in the aisle. Imani Carter stood perfectly still, her posture radiating an unnerving calm. Caroline Beaumont, for the first time, looked uncertain. The cocksure bravado had evaporated, replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. She stammered, "Owner, that's absurd. You're lying." It was a weak, desperate jab, lacking her earlier conviction. Imani didn't even grant her a glance. Her attention was fixed on the front of the cabin. The cockpit door opened and Captain Michael Harrison emerged. He was a tall man in his late 50s with silver-gray hair and a crisp, immaculate uniform that bespoke decades of authority. He was followed by a visibly shaken Chloe. The captain's face was a professional mask, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, immediately scanned the scene and locked onto Imani. He walked down the aisle, his presence commanding instant respect. He bypassed Caroline as if she were a piece of furniture and stopped directly in front of Imani. He gave a slight, respectful nod. "Dr. Carter," he said, his voice a calm baritone. "Chloe informed me. I'm Captain Harrison. I'm sorry you've been disturbed." Imani nodded back. "Captain, thank you for coming." The direct peer-to-peer exchange was all the confirmation anyone needed. The businessman in 1A slowly folded his newspaper. Gregory Beaumont sank lower in his seat, wishing the plush leather would swallow him whole. Caroline, however, seemed to be having an out-of-body experience. The reality of the situation was so far outside her comprehension that her brain refused to process it. "Captain," she interjected, stepping forward. "This woman is harassing me. She's making outlandish claims. I insist you remove her." Captain Harrison turned his head slowly to face Caroline. He looked at her not as a valued customer, but as a problem to be solved. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping a full octave laced with ice, "I believe you are the one causing the disturbance. I was informed you were questioning the credentials of a passenger, creating a hostile environment for the crew and other guests, and refusing to comply with a flight attendant's instructions." "But she's lying about who she is," Caroline insisted, her voice cracking. Imani finally spoke, her tone cool and precise. "My name is Dr. Imani Carter. I am the founder and CEO of the Carter Group, the private equity firm that acquired a 78% controlling stake in this airline 18 months ago. My team and I brought it out of bankruptcy protection. The in-flight entertainment system you're about to use, it runs on software my first company developed. The proprietary logistics network that ensures our catering is fresh and our departures are on time. I designed the core architecture myself. This plane, this seat, this crew, they are all part of my company. So, to answer your earlier question, Mrs. Beaumont, of what I have the plane." She delivered the information not with a shout, but with the dispassionate clarity of a scientist stating an irrefutable fact. Each sentence was a hammer blow, dismantling Caroline's worldview piece by piece. The silence that followed was profound. "Captain Harrison," Imani continued, turning her back on the now catatonic Caroline. "Mrs. Beaumont has, through her aggressive and discriminatory behavior, become a security concern. She has created an environment that is unsafe and hostile, not just for me but for your crew. She has flagrantly disobeyed instructions from cabin staff during a critical phase of flight preparation. Per Section 12, Subsection B of Aura Airline's Conditions of Carriage, which I personally rewrote, you are authorized to deplane any passenger who poses a threat to the safety, comfort, or welfare of other passengers or crew." She was quoting company policy, her company's policy. Captain Harrison nodded grimly. "I'm in full agreement, Dr. Carter." He turned to Caroline and Gregory. "Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, on my authority as captain of this aircraft, you are being denied travel. Your behavior is incompatible with safe passage. Please gather your personal belongings. Ground staff will meet you at the door to escort you back to the terminal." The finality in his tone was absolute. Gregory Beaumont finally found his voice, a pleading, desperate squeak. "Captain, please. My wife, she gets a little worked up. We apologize sincerely. We'll be quiet. You won't hear another peep from us, I swear." He was looking at Imani, begging, but Imani's face was like stone. She had offered an off-ramp. She had asked Caroline to stop. The time for apologies had passed. Caroline, however, had one last reserve of belligerence. The shock was wearing off, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. "You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll sue you and this whole pathetic airline. I know people. My husband is a senior vice president at Northgate Holdings. We are important." At the mention of Northgate Holdings, a flicker of something new crossed Imani's face. An idea. It was a detail she filed away for later. "Your threats are noted," Captain Harrison said flatly. He keyed his radio. "Flight deck to ground control. We are returning to the gate. Please have security meet us on the jet bridge to remove 2 passengers from the first-class cabin." The engines, which had been whining in anticipation of takeoff, began to spool down. The gentle lurch of the aircraft as it reversed course was a physical manifestation of the Beaumont's crushing defeat. Other passengers, who had been trying to pretend they weren't watching, now stared openly. A young man in 3A had his phone angled just so, the small red light of a recording betraying its purpose. As 2 uniformed Port Authority officers appeared at the open cabin door, Caroline completely unraveled. The mask of superiority shattered, revealing the ugly, terrified insecurity beneath. "No, you can't. This is my vacation. Gregory, do something." Gregory, looking utterly broken, could only mumble, "There's nothing to be done, Caroline. Just get your bag." As Chloe helped a stone-faced Caroline retrieve her Bottega Veneta handbag from the overhead bin, their eyes met. In that moment, Chloe saw no triumph in her boss's face, only a weary disappointment. This wasn't a victory. It was a necessary, unpleasant task. It was pest control at 30,000 feet. Humiliated, red-faced, and trailed by law enforcement, Caroline and Gregory Beaumont were escorted down the jet bridge, past the faces of the economy passengers who were still waiting to board. The 5-figure experience was over. But as Imani Carter returned to her seat and took a slow, calming sip of her Dom Perignon, she knew the real consequences had yet to begin. She picked up her phone and composed a short, encrypted message to Marcus Thorne, her COO. It contained just 2 words: Northgate Holdings. The walk of shame down the jet bridge was the most humiliating experience of Caroline Beaumont's life. The stares from the other passengers, the pitying looks, the undisguised smirks, they were like physical blows. By the time they were handed over to an airline representative in the terminal, she was trembling with a cocktail of rage and mortification. Gregory was silent, his face ashen, the full weight of his wife's actions crashing down upon him. Back on the plane, an unusual atmosphere had taken hold. The tension had broken, replaced by a sort of quiet awe. The other first-class passengers looked at Imani with a newfound respect. They hadn't just witnessed a case of an entitled passenger being put in her place. They had witnessed a masterclass in controlled power. Captain Harrison came back to her seat before returning to the cockpit. "Dr. Carter, on behalf of the entire crew, I apologize again for what you endured." "There is no need for an apology, Captain," Imani replied, her voice soft again. "You and your crew, especially Chloe, handled a difficult situation with professionalism. The failure was not one of service, but of character." She looked toward Chloe, who was standing nearby. "Chloe, you were excellent. Thank you." Chloe, who had been bracing for a reprimand for letting the situation escalate, looked visibly relieved. "Thank you, Dr. Carter. Please ensure the Beaumont's luggage is removed from the hold," Imani added, "and issue them a full refund for their tickets. I want no financial claim from them against this company. Also, place a permanent, system-wide ban on both of them from ever flying on Aura Airlines or any of our partner carriers again. Marcus can handle the legalities." "It will be done," Captain Harrison affirmed with a nod before retreating to prepare for their now delayed departure. As the plane finally took to the sky, climbing smoothly over the lights of Long Island, Imani reclined her seat. The incident had left a sour taste in her mouth. She took no pleasure in public humiliation, but she had learned long ago that to tolerate such behavior was to condone it. As the owner of a company that employed over 20,000 people of every race, religion, and background, she had a responsibility. The culture of respect she demanded in her boardrooms had to extend to her cabins. She pulled out her laptop, connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, another system one of her subsidiary companies had helped pioneer, and began to work. The name Caroline had shrieked in desperation, echoed in her mind. Northgate Holdings. It was a large, publicly traded commercial real estate conglomerate. Not a direct competitor, but their name was familiar. She sent a more detailed email to her COO, Marcus Thorne, a man whose efficiency and ruthlessness in business were legendary. Marcus had an unpleasant incident on the flight to LHR, had to deplane 2 passengers, Caroline and Gregory Beaumont, for aggressive and racist behavior. The female passenger was the primary instigator. In her tirade, she mentioned her husband, Gregory, is a senior vice president at Northgate Holdings. I have a vague recollection that we have dealings with them. Please have your team do a deep dive. I want to know the full extent of our business relationship with Northgate, direct or indirect. I want to know who Gregory Beaumont is, what he does, and which division he's in. I want to know about Northgate's corporate structure, their major clients, and their code of conduct policies. I want it all on my desk by the time I land. Best, Imani. She hit send. In London, it was already early morning. Marcus would have the email within seconds. She knew his team, a small army of analysts and legal experts, would descend upon Northgate Holdings like wolves. Meanwhile, in the sterile environment of JFK's Terminal 4, the Beaumont's reality was continuing to crumble. An Airline's ground manager, a stern woman named Maria, met them in a small private office. "Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont," Maria began, her voice devoid of sympathy. "Your travel has been terminated due to a breach of our conditions of carriage. Your luggage is being offloaded and will be brought to you here. Your tickets will be refunded in full within 7 to 10 business days." "Refunded? I don't want a refund. I want to be on that plane," Caroline snapped. "I want to speak to your supervisor." Maria slid a printed card across the table. "I am the highest-ranking manager on site. Any further complaints must be submitted in writing to our corporate office. However, I must also inform you that by order of the airline's executive office, you have both been permanently banned from flying with Airlines and all of our Sky Alliance partners, effective immediately." Gregory's head shot up. Banned? Permanently? Across the whole alliance? That wasn't just Aura. That was Delta, Air France, KLM, dozens of major carriers. Their world of convenient travel had just shrunk dramatically. "Yes, sir," Maria confirmed. "Furthermore, the Port Authority has issued you with a formal warning for causing a disturbance. There will be no charges, but the incident is now on record." Caroline was speechless. The consequences were cascading, growing larger and more serious with each passing moment. Her spoiled vacation was the least of her worries now. This was a permanent black mark. As they sat in stunned silence, waiting for their luggage, Gregory's phone buzzed. It was a text from a colleague who was also supposed to be on a flight to Europe. Text: "Hey Greg, weird thing. Saw a video on Twitter of some lady getting kicked off an Aura flight at JFK. Swear it looks just like Caroline. Hope you guys are okay." Gregory's blood ran cold. He fumbled with his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. He opened Twitter. It wasn't hard to find. The video shot by the passenger in 3A was already going viral. It had been posted with the caption, "Karen gets a karma smackdown after harassing a black woman in first class. Wait for the twist at the end. #Karen gone it wrong, #Aura Airlines." The video showed it all. Caroline's condescending remarks, her shriek to have Imani moved, Imani's calm, powerful confrontation, the captain's arrival, and the devastating reveal. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but the audio was crystal clear, including Caroline's final desperate shout. "My husband is a senior vice president at Northgate Holdings." He watched the view count tick up in real time. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. It was spreading like wildfire. Comments flooded in, condemning Caroline's behavior. His name and his company's name were now attached to a viral video of his wife having a racist meltdown. This was no longer a private humiliation. It was a very, very public disaster. And as he looked at his wife, who was still muttering about lawsuits, he realized she had no idea of the bomb she had just detonated under their entire lives. The karma wasn't just hitting back. It was coming in for a precision strike. By the time Aura Flight 100 descended through the morning clouds over London, a comprehensive dossier was waiting in Imani Carter's encrypted inbox. Marcus Thorne did not disappoint. The file was titled Project Nightingale. a wry, clinical name for the dismantling of the Beaumont's world. It was meticulously organized. Section 1. Gregory Beaumont. He was the SVP of Commercial Leasing for Northgate's Northeast region, a significant position. He oversaw lease agreements for dozens of high-value commercial properties in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. His career had been solid, if unspectacular, built on decades of relationship management. Section 2. Northgate Holdings. A real estate giant with a multi-billion-dollar portfolio. Publicly, they espoused a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Their website was filled with stock photos of smiling, diverse teams and proclamations about their unwavering commitment to a respectful and inclusive workplace. Section 3. The Connection. This was the heart of the matter. Marcus's team had found it. The Carter Group, Imani's parent company, didn't deal with Northgate directly. But Viridian Logistics, a massive multinational shipping and warehousing firm that the Carter Group had acquired 2 years prior, did. And their connection was critical. Viridian Logistics was Northgate's exclusive logistics partner for their entire East Coast portfolio. They handled everything from office relocations for incoming tenants to the complex supply chain management for the retail spaces in Northgate's buildings. The contract, Marcus highlighted, was worth over $80 million annually to Viridian. It was also up for renewal in 90 days. But the most crucial piece of information was buried in the fine print of the contract, a clause Marcus's legal team had flagged in bright red. Clause 11.3b, the Brand Integrity and Conduct Clause. It stated that either party could terminate the agreement with prejudice if an executive-level employee of the other party engaged in public conduct that brought disrepute, contempt, or public ridicule upon their organization, thereby harming the brand integrity of their business partner. The clause was designed to protect both companies from exactly this kind of PR nightmare. Imani read the clause twice. It was a corporate guillotine, and Caroline Beaumont had just handed her the rope. She typed a quick reply. To Marcus Thorne, from Imani Carter. Subject, Project Nightingale. Marcus, excellent work. The video is unfortunate but useful. Do not engage with it publicly. Let it run its course. Draft a letter to Jonathan Sterling, the CEO of Northgate Holdings. Formal, polite, but unequivocal. Reference Clause 1.3b. Attach a link to the viral video and a copy of the official incident report from Captain Harrison. State that the public behavior of their senior vice president, Gregory Beaumont, and his wife, acting as his representative in a public space, constitutes a severe breach of the Brand Integrity Clause. State that the Carter Group and its subsidiaries, including Viridian Logistics, cannot in good conscience remain in partnership with an organization whose senior leadership is publicly associated with such discriminatory and unprofessional conduct. Inform them that we are exercising our right to place the renewal of the Viridian Logistics contract on indefinite hold pending a full, transparent, and satisfactory resolution from their end. Do not issue threats. Do not make demands. Simply state the facts and our position. Let them connect the dots. Send the letter today. I want it on Sterling's desk before he's had his lunch. I'll be at the Connaught by noon. Imani. In New York, it was still the dead of night, but Marcus Thorne was in his home office, a cup of black coffee steaming beside him. He read Imani's instructions and allowed himself a thin smile. It was perfect. It wasn't revenge. It was business. It was a cold, calculated move based on contractual obligations and brand protection. Meanwhile, Gregory Beaumont was living through the worst day of his life. After retrieving their luggage and taking a silent, excruciatingly long taxi ride back to their Connecticut home, he had walked into his study and shut the door. The video had surpassed 1 million views. Northgate Holdings was trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons. His phone was now blowing up with calls and texts from colleagues, friends, and, most terrifyingly, his boss, the executive VP for the entire East Coast division. He finally answered, his hand shaking. "Greg, what the hell is going on?" His boss's voice boomed through the phone. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing for 3 hours. The comms team is in full panic mode. Is that Caroline in that video? Is that you sitting next to her? Robert, it's a misunderstanding. Gregory stammered, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. A misunderstanding? Greg, the whole world is watching your wife call a black woman a stowaway and then scream our company's name while being dragged off a plane by cops. The board is calling emergency meetings. Our stock is predicted to take a hit on open tomorrow. What were you thinking? I didn't. Save it. Robert cut him off. Jonathan Sterling's office has been in touch. He wants to see you. 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. The line went dead. Gregory felt a wave of nausea. A meeting with the CEO. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was an execution. The next morning, Gregory drove to Northgate's gleaming Manhattan headquarters in a state of pure dread. He felt like a dead man walking. When he was ushered into the penthouse office of Jonathan Sterling, the CEO was standing by the window, his back to the door, looking out over the city. Gregory, Sterling said without turning around. His voice was dangerously quiet. Mr. Sterling, sir, I am so sorry. Sterling turned. He was holding a tablet. On the screen was the letter from Marcus Thorne. Sorry doesn't begin to cover it, Gregory, Sterling said, his voice cold as steel. Do you know who the Carter Group is? Gregory shook his head, confused. They are a behemoth, a quiet giant that owns dozens of companies. Tech, manufacturing, logistics. Their CEO, Imani Carter, is one of the sharpest, most respected business leaders in the world. She's also a black woman, and, as it turns out, she's the woman your wife chose to publicly harass and humiliate on one of her own airplanes. Gregory's world tilted on its axis. The owner. The woman wasn't just an owner, she was the owner. Imani Carter. He'd read about her in Fortune magazine. The Carter Group, Sterling continued, also owns Viridian Logistics, our exclusive logistics partner. An $80 million contract that you, in your role, are peripherally responsible for maintaining a good relationship with. This morning I received this letter. They are putting the contract renewal on hold, citing your public conduct as a breach of brand integrity. They are, in essence, preparing to fire us as a client because of you. He tossed the tablet onto his massive oak desk. So, Gregory, you haven't just embarrassed us. You haven't just created a PR disaster. You have, in one afternoon, jeopardized one of the most significant operational contracts in this entire company. You have cost us millions in potential lost revenue, and God knows how much in reputational damage. Gregory stood, speechless, his career flashing before his eyes. All the years of hard work, the promotions, the sacrifices, all of it undone by one afternoon of his wife's unchecked bigotry. Sterling walked around his desk and sat down, folding his hands. The finality in his eyes was terrifying. Northgate Holdings cannot and will not be associated with this. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior, and more importantly, we have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders. You have become a liability of catastrophic proportions. He slid a single folder across the desk. This is your severance agreement. It is minimal. Sign it. An armed security guard will escort you to your office to collect your personal effects. You will then be escorted from the building. Your corporate accounts have already been frozen. Your employment at Northgate Holdings is terminated, effective immediately. The hard karma had landed. It wasn't just a canceled vacation or a public shaming. It was a corporate decapitation, swift and brutal. As Gregory Beaumont signed away his career, he knew his life would never be the same. And it was all because his wife couldn't stand the sight of a successful black woman sitting in a first-class seat she felt was rightfully hers. The news of Gregory Beaumont's termination was not a quiet ripple. It was a sonic boom that echoed through the gilded canyons of Wall Street and the manicured lawns of suburban Connecticut. Northgate Holdings, in a masterstroke of corporate self-preservation, had swiftly and publicly cauterized its wound. The press release was a work of art in damage control, a symphony of carefully chosen buzzwords. unwavering commitment, core values, zero tolerance, thorough internal review. Gregory Beaumont was not named, but he was the ghost haunting every line, the unnamed sinner whose public sacrifice was meant to appease the new gods of corporate accountability. For the Beaumonts themselves, the fallout was a slow, suffocating avalanche. They were trapped in their palatial home, a monument to a life that had evaporated overnight. The silence within its walls was a living entity, thick and accusatory. Gregory sat in his mahogany-paneled study, the room where he'd taken calls and closed deals that built this very house, and stared at the termination letter on his desk. It was a single sheet of paper, cold and impersonal, that had invalidated 30 years of his life. Caroline entered without knocking. Her face, usually a carefully maintained mask of cosmetic perfection, was puffy and blotchy. The helmet of hair was slightly askew. "Well?" she demanded, her voice brittle. "What are you going to do?" Gregory looked up at her, and for the first time in their 25 years of marriage, he saw her not as his wife, but as the architect of his ruin. The anger he expected to feel wasn't there. It had been replaced by a profound, hollow emptiness. "There is nothing to do, Caroline," he said, his voice raspy. "It's done." "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed, reverting to her default setting of dismissive arrogance. "You'll call Jonathan. You'll explain. This is an overreaction, an absurdity. You'll tell him you're going to sue that woman, that airline owner." Gregory let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded like tearing fabric. "Sue her? On what grounds? For being racially abused by my wife? For having her staff and her other customers harassed? Caroline, do you have any idea what you've done?" He stood up, his voice rising with a tremor of long-suppressed frustration. "This wasn't some spat over a seat. You publicly, viciously attacked a woman who turned out to be Dr. Imani Carter. The Imani Carter. You didn't just pick a fight, you walked into a lion's den wearing a meat suit and you screamed our address as you were being mauled." "I was defending our position," she cried, her own voice cracking. "We paid for that. We belong in places like that. She didn't. And who gave you the authority to decide who belongs?" He shot back, the question hanging in the air, heavy and damning. "Was it your superior intellect, your unimpeachable moral character? Or was it just because she was a black woman, and in your tiny, frightened little world, that means she couldn't possibly have earned her way there?" The directness of the accusation struck Caroline silent. It was a truth she had never allowed to surface, and hearing it from her husband felt like a betrayal. "I am your wife," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears of self-pity. "Yes," Gregory said, slumping back into his chair, the fight draining out of him. "You are. And I stood by. I let it happen. I mumbled, 'Please stop,' while you loaded the gun and aimed it at our own heads. So this is on me too." He looked around the opulent room, at the leather-bound books he'd never read, and the sailing trophies from a life he was pretending to enjoy. "I am unemployed. I am a pariah. Our name is a synonym for bigotry on the internet. Our friends have vanished, and it's all because you couldn't stand the thought that a black woman was your equal. No," he corrected himself, a horrifying clarity dawning on him. "Not your equal. Your superior in every conceivable way, and you couldn't bear it." The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of a tomb, the sound of a shared life finally and irrevocably breaking. A week later, in her penthouse office overlooking a sun-drenched Central Park, Imani Carter reviewed the final report from Marcus Thorne. It was titled simply, "Beaumont File." It contained the Northgate press release, a dozen articles from major financial news outlets, a social media sentiment analysis that showed a 95% negative rating for the Beaumonts, and a 98% positive rating for her own handling of the incident, and a formal, groveling letter of apology from Jonathan Sterling. Marcus walked in, holding a tablet. "He's still calling," Marcus said, foregoing a greeting. "Sterling, he wants a meeting. He's offering to fly here tomorrow, on his own dime, of course." "Of course," Imani said dryly. She looked at the file. At the digital wreckage of 2 lives, she felt no triumph, no satisfaction. She felt a profound weariness, the exhaustion of a battle she never wanted to fight but couldn't afford to lose. This incident had dredged up ghosts she thought she had long since buried. She remembered being 23, the only black woman in her doctoral program at Caltech, being told by a professor that her grasp of theoretical physics was surprisingly strong. She remembered being 30, pitching her revolutionary logistics software to a room full of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and being asked by one of them whose coffee order she was there to take. Each time, she had swallowed the rage, channeled it, and used it as fuel. She had promised herself that one day she would build a world so vast, a platform so high, that she would never again have her presence questioned. And she had succeeded. But the irony was that even here, at the absolute apex in the first-class cabin of her own damn plane, the ghost had found her again, this time in the form of Caroline Beaumont. She offered a donation, Marcus continued, pulling Imani from her reverie. Northgate, a 7-figure donation to the Urban STEM Initiative. Atonement through wire transfer, Imani murmured. He's not trying to fix his corporate soul, Marcus. He's trying to fix his Viridian logistics contract. Naturally, Marcus agreed. So what's our play? Do we let them sweat? Do we pull the contract and make an example of them? The board of Viridian would support it. The PR value alone would be immense. The Carter Group severs ties with firm over racist incident. It writes itself. This was the core of it, the calculus of consequence. She had the power to bring a multi-billion-dollar corporation to its knees, to punish it for the sins of one executive's wife. It would be seen by many as righteous. But was it just? She stood and walked to the vast window. Power, she had learned, was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Using it required precision, a deep understanding of the outcome you wanted to achieve. Revenge was easy. Change was hard. What good does it do to cripple them? She thought aloud. Thousands of their employees lose their jobs or have their pensions threatened. Their shareholders, which include retirement funds for teachers and firefighters, take a massive hit. All because of Caroline Beaumont's ignorance and Jonathan Sterling's situational ethics? No, that's not justice, that's just collateral damage. She turned back to Marcus. Here's what we are going to do. You will arrange a meeting, not with me, with you, our head of legal and our head of diversity and inclusion. You will inform Mr. Sterling that his donation has been accepted, but that absolution is not for sale. She began to pace, the strategy forming in her mind clear and sharp. You will tell him that the renewal of the Viridian contract is contingent on a new clause we are adding, a social responsibility audit clause. It will give us the right to perform an annual, independent audit of their hiring practices, pay equity, promotion rates for minorities, and the efficacy of their internal training. We will have veto power over the firm they hire to conduct it. They will be on probation, a very public probation, for the next 5 years. We will not be their partner. We will be their warden. Every year, a summary of that audit will be made available to our board, and by extension our shareholders. Marcus's eyebrows rose. This was far more intricate and devastatingly effective than simply walking away. It turned Northgate's entire corporate culture into a glass cage. We force them to live the values they print in their glossy brochures, Imani finished. We make them put their money where their press release is. If they agree, the contract discussions can resume. If they refuse, then they were never serious in the first place, and we can walk away with a clear conscience. It was a brilliant move. It transformed a moment of racist ugliness into a long-term, legally binding instrument for positive change. It wasn't just punishment. It was rehabilitation, enforced at the corporate level. Consider it done, Marcus said, a rare hint of admiration in his voice. And the other items? Yes, Imani said, her tone softening. The flight attendant, Chloe. I've reviewed her file. She's been with us for 4 years, impeccable record. Promote her to cabin supervisor. Give her a 20% raise and a personal commendation from my office. I want our people to know that we reward grace under fire." "And the passenger in 3A? The one with the camera phone?" Imani smiled faintly. "An aspiring journalist named Kevin Luo. He's a student at Columbia. I read his Twitter feed. He's smart. He didn't post the video for clicks. He posted it because he was genuinely outraged. He saw an injustice and used the tool he had. Send him the first-class tickets, yes, but also offer him a paid summer internship in our corporate communications department. Let's see if we can't turn that raw talent into a real career." She was turning every negative into a positive, transforming the poison of the incident into medicine for her own organization. As Marcus left to execute his orders, Imani stayed at the window. She thought of Gregory Beaumont, a man whose weakness and complicity had cost him everything. She felt a sliver of pity for him, but it was fleeting. He had made his choices, or rather he had chosen not to make them, which was a choice in itself. Her responsibility was not to him, but to the 20,000 employees of Aura Airlines, to her shareholders, and to the silent promise she'd made to her younger self. Wealth gave you the ability to own the airline, but true power, the power she was interested in, was the authority to define its culture, to set its moral altitude, and to ensure that everyone who flew in her sky, from the cockpit to the last row of economy, was treated with a fundamental non-negotiable dignity. The weight of that power was immense, far heavier than any balance sheet. And in the quiet of her office, high above the city, Imani Carter bore it with unwavering resolve. It wasn't a victory she felt, but the solemn satisfaction of a principle upheld. And so, the story of the Beaumonts serves as a powerful real-world reminder that character is the one thing you can't buy, no matter how much money you have. Caroline Beaumont's prejudice cost her more than a vacation. It cost her family their reputation, their career, and their social standing. She learned the hard way that the person you choose to look down on might just be the one holding the ladder you're trying to climb. This wasn't just about an argument on a plane. It was about accountability. It shows that in our interconnected world, the consequences of our actions can be swift, far-reaching, and utterly devastating. True power isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about the quiet confidence of knowing who you are and the integrity to stand by your principles. What did you think of this incredible story of karma? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that people should be held accountable for their actions, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true stories of drama and justice. Thanks for listening.